But with that, I'm going to go ahead and say good evening. Welcome to the show. I'm going to go ahead and get started. I know we're a couple minutes behind. Welcome to the show. As always, I thank you for spending your Thursday night with me. I'm truly humbled. My show is called I Got Something to Say, so it must be true. My name is Hank Batiste. I'm your host tonight and every night, it seems. Me and voices in my head, we're going through it, folks. I'm wondering why it took the Dems again so long. These last couple of weeks, I've been talking about I've been coming down hard on what I call the co-conspirators of Black Lives Matter. I educate it and I try to analyze and re-educate the masses on the role of the judges and the police department, the Black justice system. But now, tonight, we're going to talk a little bit about the legislative part of what I call a three-pronged demon, this three-headed demon, if you will. They play and they create a situation where we fall out on the bottom of the totem pole. It causes us to fight amongst ourselves, about what the problem is. And just like you, at this point in time, I'm kind of overwhelmed because I'm seeing what's going on. And like I said last week, I'm sick and tired of being sick and tired. So if you're feeling that way, imagine I'm feeling the same way as well. Back in November, my Creole Powers told you, I made the prediction that Joe Biden would win the election. He won. I also predicted that before Biden took office, I said that he would have a couple issues. One would be Despicable Donnie would continue to haunt the Republicans, but I had no idea it would be to this degree. Other thing I talked about is even with the majority in the House and the Senate, Biden would have problems within the Democratic Party. And a little later, I'll kind of tell you why. I made a bunch of predictions, if you will, and a lot of them have come to pass. But tonight we're going to focus on two predictions, Despicable Donnie and the dissension in the Democratic ranks, because I see this as the most immediate threat to us right now. Tonight, I'm going to try to explain to you how these predictions are intertwined off. We have a Senate Trumpublican in sheep's clothing. He's a wolf in sheep's clothing who has been a thorn in Biden's side, and I knew that this would be. I said a long time ago when he first reared his ugly head that if he was not put in check, then by 2022, Biden would become a lame duck president and wouldn't be able to get anything done. So tonight, I'm going to try to break it down to you, or for you to it's unfixably broke. I'm going to talk a little bit about this. I'm going to talk a little bit about that. And finally, I'm going to tell you about a solution for combating what I call this resurgence of the Senate Trumpublican or the Senate Dixiecrat by the name of Joe Manless-chin. They call him Joe Manchin. I say the dude has no chin. So I say Joe Manless-chin. Tonight's show is called Joe Manless-chin, the Neo-Dixiecrat versus the Dems. Did you hear me? Tonight's show is called Joe Manless-chin, the Neo-Dixiecrat. I'm going to tell you what a Dixiecrat is versus the Dems. Let's omit the logic. I got something to say. It must be true. First of all, let me tell you what a Dixiecrat is. The history of the Dixiecrat or Dixiecrats. In high school, I was a little bit of a thespian. I was in a drama club, and I always felt like Shakespeare was a brother. His rap was so strong. What lies beyond yonder window breaks. It is the sun, and Juliet is the moon and stars, and I see the starlight in your eyes. And I just felt like his rap was so strong, he had to be a brother. But in his play called A Tempest, Shakespeare wrote something and it took on a life of its own. He wrote that misery acquaints itself with strange bedfellows. From this line, a man by the name, supposedly, of Charles Dudley Warner said that politics make strange bedfellows. I would say to anybody, but I would say to them, personal ambitions like-minded prejudices create alliances from people across the political divide. And by that, I mean whether you call yourself a Republican, a Democrat, a conservative, a liberal, a progressive, when you find yourself in a place where someone else's ambitions are lateral or bilateral to your own, it creates what we call strange bedfellows. But in short, all it means is you guys are using each other to get what you want, be it power or otherwise. A couple of weeks ago, I don't know if you were listening, but I told you the history of Jim Crow. Because I only have a half-hour show, I cut a lot of this stuff short because I know you guys don't really want to go back to History 101 or civics or U.S. history or what have you, but I want you to understand the historical relationship and these collaborations between these people. Everyone knew that or knows that Lincoln was a Republican. Because Lincoln freed the slaves, initially Black folks and all Black politicians were Republicans. They gravitated to and voted to the Republican Party. This went on until some say right after Reconstruction, there were plans put in place to integrate us into positions where we could represent ourselves, because nobody could talk about what it felt like to be a slave, but to be 3/5 of a man better than a slave who had been regarded as chattel or less than a man. That was then. This is now. The relationship between Dems and the Black folks, some say it first happened in what was called the Great Compromise. And now, I'm sorry, I got to take you here for as history is concerned, because a man that does not know his history is doomed to relive it. So the Great Compromise of 1877, see, in 1870, we Black men were given the right to vote. In addition to that, a lot of us Black men were elected to Congress and this sort of thing. We became governors, we became politicians, and we were looking out for those like ourselves who had been former slaves. You know, I always give this historical analysis. In 1876, there was a presidential election, and I'm not even going to go into all the people and blah, 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 but just suffice it to say that the election ended in a dead heat. And some historians, I believe as well, say that there was a backroom deal made. The Republicans were given the White House at the cost of us. Because at the times, the Dems were primarily Southerners, and they were fighting to hold on to the power in the South. So they had federal troops in the South. The Republicans sent federal troops to the South to make sure that we had an opportunity to vote, to make sure that some of the, not just the Emancipation Proclamation, but a lot of those what's called tenets of Reconstruction were implemented. After this 1876 election, there was a backroom deal made where the Republicans were given the White House on the promise of removing federal troops from the South. That was the onset of Jim Crow, because the Democrats back then were the ones wearing the sheets. The Democrats back then were the ones who had been primarily slave owners and what have you. So they said, we'll let you have the White House if you allow us to maintain our way of life and stop these people right where they are. So that was the first thing. And then after time, the Republican Party sold us out more and more. By the time, and just think of it as almost 90 years from 1876 to 1960, when, and there's a couple other things, but I won't go into them. But by the time JFK was running for the White House, he was seen as someone young and progressive enough that we could follow. So that was almost a cement to 90% of Black folks becoming Democrats. My mom's used to say, pay attention to where you are, because when you pass that way again, you'll recognize the territory and you can avoid making the same mistakes. That's why I got into history, people. You understand? It's not that this stuff is so sexy or this, that, and the other. Politicians are the easiest people to read because most of them use history to plot their strategies. Today's Republicans have canonized Reagan to the point of a saint-like status. Consequently, many of these Trump-publicans, many of the Republicans who consider themselves to be conservatives, they use code words and they use white people's fear to sway poor white people who gets nothing out of the deal other than helping them to preserve the status quo. The rich getting richer, them that have, them that don't, will never have. They believe that, like Reagan, if they give tax breaks to the rich, if they remove regulations to corporations, corporations can do what they want to do, and they believe that wealth will magically somehow trickle down to the poor and disenfranchised. Like Woodrow Wilson, Nixon, and Reagan and the social programs of their predecessors meant to level the economic playing field and some of the social playing fields for Black folks first, because we usually are, for a lack of a better word, what happens good for us is spread to other protected groups. So Woodrow Wilson was a Democrat. He was the one who actually, he was the first one to run a movie in the White House. That movie was called Birth of a Nation. What it did was give legitimacy to the Ku Klux Klan. He was backing one of his boys that he had went to college with. And by doing so, he did away with the other social programs that were a part of Reconstruction. They were meant so that we could get our 40 acres and a mule and so forth and so on. So it basically just negated all of that. Like Trump, Joe Manchin loves the sudden attention that he's gotten just by opposing those of his own party. When you look, I posted a couple things this week. I've been posting some things for you to see, some of what I've saw, but they refer to him in the state of West Virginia as their own Donald Trump. Just like McConnell, Manchin has a stronghold over the state of West Virginia where he's getting richer and the people of West Virginia are getting poorer. This is the same thing that Mitch did in Kentucky. Mitch is by far the richest senator. And one would argue that Kentucky is, if not the poorest, in the top 3 for the poorest state in the Union, in the United States of America. Just like Trump, Manchin loves this attention that he's gotten just by opposing Biden and all of his policies. Imagine all of a sudden he's famous. All of a sudden somebody is always shoving a microphone in his face. So now he has all of this attention. He has a name. The difference is the people of West Virginia are dirt poor, and they're tired of being poor. They're tired of being walked on while Manchin make these backroom deals, makes himself richer and richer. In the beginning of Biden's presidency, I call it his 100-day success. I told you that Biden would hit the ground running, and he made very, very, very bold moves that ensured him immediate success. He signed executive orders that resulted in COVID relief bills, and he gave Americans not only a COVID shot, he gave them an economic shot in the arm of $1,400. So he kept his promise of getting $2,000 to every American. And some people got more, you know. After he did this, initially while it was happening, this was the first time that Manchin went up against him. But it was the governor of West Virginia who said that the people of West Virginia needed this money. So he needed to get with the program, with Biden's program, with Biden's vision. So this is how they got that pass. What happened is now he had that. Then he promised us 100 million shots of COVID vaccine, 100 million shots in the first 100 days. So once he surpassed that, he had these 2 huge feathers in his political cap. Instead of everybody celebrating these things, of course, the Republicans have to be the obstructionists. So they started spinning this thing. Well, Biden made a campaign promise to not just move unilaterally. Forget what we did. Biden said he wouldn't do it. So after the media started to beat up on him, he started to slow down. Media beat up on him for kind of imitating some of the things that Trump did with the executive orders. The problem, as I see it, that Biden made is he underestimated his relationship with those people that he had been working with for 40 years up on Capitol Hill. If you have ever been one of the Indians and then you were suddenly promoted to chief, you understand that the people that you have the most problems for is those people that work beside you when you were an Indian. And this is one of the biggest problems that Biden had. He misunderstood those people. Very, very, very few people that we call friends are going to celebrate our successes, especially if they're stuck in the same place that we left them in. So be it a miscalculation or be it arrogance, Biden made a fatal mistake. I anticipated it because I've been that once Indian and then Indian chief. And I know one of my boys, when I was at Bethesda, I got promoted. And one of the guys I was working with said, "Oh man, we got it made now. My boy's in charge. I said, "Oh, no, the hell we not." Because if we boys I shouldn't have to handle you. If we boys, you know that I'm living under a microscope. So they're going to be watching me 10 times harder. If we boys, you're going to work 10 times harder for me because you know that my success is your success. Obviously, this is not a lesson that Biden took into consideration immediately or initially, but I'm sure he's taking it into consideration now. What he should have realized is every 199 of the 200 senators all wanted to do what he did, go from being senator, not to being vice president, but to being president. So he was no longer one of them. He's now the outsider. And those relationships that he had with McConnell and Manchin, all bets are off. Even the relationship that he had with, what's her name? I'm not going to talk about her. But all of a sudden, okay, I'll just say Warren, Elizabeth Warren, me and Biden had this, and she attacked him on the stage. And as soon as she realized that he was going to get the nomination, and now that he's president, she talked about what he was going to do and how it wouldn't be progressive enough and so forth and so on. So he should have realized this. What Manchin saw was how Trump had amassed this huge following based on two things: hate and what I call white fright. I stole that one from Chris Cuomo. Trump amassed this huge following, and he built this political machine that's still pressing on the Republicans, even though he's been out of office for almost 6 months now. Certainly, we knew that he was gone back in November. So Manchin sees an opportunity. Therefore, he seized the opportunity. The thing that got me is if I could analyze this situation, make a deduction and a prediction that Manchin would do this. And I didn't even work with the man. I just looked at those people within the Democratic Party that would be the people we have to deal with. As an administrator, you put together what's called a SWOT: your strengths, your weaknesses, your opportunities, and your threat. And doing those four things is how I put together, well, one of my degrees is in managerial planning. So it's one of the things that I do. And it's not like I am the smartest or the sharpest knife in the drawer. So if I can come up with these perceived opportunities and threat, then obviously somebody in your cabinet has to say, Mr. President, here are your strengths. Talking directly to the American people. Here are your weaknesses. There are people within our own party that we need to be concerned with. Here are opportunities. Because you have this background in foreign affairs and 40 years in public service, you know what needs to be done. The threats are what are the people, what are the threats that are immediate? Who are the people that are going to be the ones to bring these threats to life? How will these threats manifest themselves? How can we anticipate and deal with them? Adapt, improvise, and overcome. There's a time when a Marine can't ignore and override. You have to adapt. So I said all of this to say this. I said that the Dems needed to be dealing with this new barracuda up on Capitol Hill. And I said the best way to do that is to mount a campaign against him in his own backyard and put him on a defensive. But the more I study West Virginia, the more I see that he's so much like Trump, even though these people are dirt poor and what have you. This is the devil that they know. This is the devil that they're comfortable with. So I said, plan B would be this. We've got a slim, slim lead. My daughter said, if they had another Dem, I said, well, then it would be 51 to 51. Because even if there were only one additional Democratic senator who would vote for Biden's Build Back Better, it still wouldn't stop Manchin from voting against. So it would be 51 on one side and 51, including Kamala Harris, on the other side. So now they're starting to do what I would have anticipated or what I would have advised them to do. The way to negate Manchin is simple. We have to attack those other red chairs in the Senate that are up for re-election in 2022. And somebody was inside of my head. Somebody's been listening to my podcast because this past week or within this past month, Val Demings is running for senator. She's taking on Marco Rubio. So that's one. So what role do we play in this? The Republicans have done all this redistricting. They've done all of this thing. But the thing about governor, no matter how they divide up the state, we still get to vote for governor. We still get to vote for senator. So these are the two places that we can take them. Just like Val Demings is running for Senate here in Florida, be on the lookout for those Democrats in your area who are running against these red state Republicans. We did it in Georgia, we can do it in Florida, and we can do it in other places. The more chairs we take in the Senate, especially, the easier it's going to be to get some progressive legislation passed. In addition to that, I think Biden needs to keep on making bold moves and not worried about how it looks, at least to 2022, because otherwise they're going to say he didn't do anything. Regardless to those successes he had in the first 100 days, he's going to be a lame duck for the next 2.5 years. We have seen in the last 2 months how Manchin has tied this ankle to Biden's weight and pulled them under, and Biden is drowning. So, Dixiecrat. The original Dixiecrat in Congress was a man by the name of Strom Thurmond. Strom was a Democrat initially. When some of these Democrats, like Kennedy, decided to start sending federal troops into the South again to push for things like, and this is even before Kennedy, for things like the Brown versus the Board of Education and integrating schools and making sure that integration was happening. Strom Thurmond went from being a Democrat. They renamed some people within the Democratic Party as Dixiecrats. And Strom went from being a Democrat to a Dixiecrat. And then he said, from here on out, I will be known as a Republican. Whether Manchin ever identifies with being a Republican, what he's doing now is Republicanist. So, folks, that's all I got for you tonight. Be on the lookout. In your city, in your state, if you see these Dems running for Senate, If you see these Dems running for governor, make sure you get out. Make sure that you mobilize the people around you so that they can vote. It's imperative that we have more Democratic governors who behave like today's Democrats, not like the Democrats of yesteryears. If we do that, we can get past this. That's all I got for you tonight, folks. Now, it's a monster because there's so many ways that they can come at us. It's a monster because just like back in slavery, we've got Black folks who are pretending. They believe by being slave catchers, they will be accepted. So they're doing the same thing that these Black folks did back then. The Tim Scotts and people like that, they're not the first, they won't be the last. I want you to do me a favor. It's been a minute, but I'm going to say it again. Don't be so afraid to die that you forget to live for a purpose. Thumbs up. Tell me what you like most about this, and I'll get back to you. I'll see you next week, right here. Same Baptiste time, same Baptiste place. I'm Hank Batiste. I'm your host. Omit the logic. This shit makes no sense. I got something to say. It must be true, folks. As always, imparting. I wish you love. I wish you peace. We can beat these knuckleheads. We built for it. Hair grease. I'm out. Good night. What's up, people?